I was 30 years old when my mother finally said the one sentence that clarified my entire childhood, my entire adolescence, and every strained adult interaction we'd ever had. She said it lightly, so lightly that if I hadn't been starving for her affection all my life, I might have missed the blade hidden between the syllables. You can sit at the small table, Lena. We need space at this one for the core family. And there it was. The moment my illusions detonated. The moment 30 years of careful, pathetic hope collapsed into dust. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The story didn't begin that night at La Belle Étoile, the most pretentious restaurant in Hallberg City. It began a week earlier with a phone call. My mother's voice bright, sugary, and catastrophically deceptive. "Lena, sweetheart," she sang into the phone. The tone alone should have warned me. My mother only used that syrupy register when she wanted something or when she was about to pretend something awful was perfectly normal. "Hi, Mom," I said cautiously. "What's up?" "Oh, nothing dramatic. Your father and I just realized it's been ages since we all sat down to a proper family dinner. You know, just the 5 of us. Me, your father, your brother, his wife, and you." She paused, then added almost as an afterthought. "We've booked a table at La Belle Étoile next Thursday. You'll come, won't you?" La Belle Étoile was not a casual suggestion. You didn't pop into a restaurant where the cheapest entree cost half my rent. My logical brain, the one I relied on daily as a senior forensic accountant, immediately calculated the odds. My parents didn't splurge without a motive. They never invited me to things that were genuinely intended for me. And they always used the phrase, "just family," when something exclusionary was brewing. But the younger part of me, the Lena who used to sit on her bedroom floor listening for footsteps that meant maybe, just maybe, someone wanted to spend time with her, perked up. Maybe they wanted to celebrate my recent certification. Maybe they had finally learned to see me. Maybe this time I wouldn't be the shadow standing at the edge of the photo. So I swallowed my instinctual dread and said, "Yeah, can be there." "What time?" 7:30. "We're something polished, darling. This place has standards." The jab landed exactly where she intended it to. A subtle reminder that she never believed I naturally belonged anywhere upscale, no matter how hard I worked. But I still said, "Sure. I'll see you then." And then I spent the next week doing something stupid and dangerous. Hope. Hope, I've learned, is a fragile addiction. I imagined my parents wanting to reconnect. I imagined my brother finally treating me like an equal. I imagined my mother saying something, anything, approaching pride. In reality, nothing in my 30 years suggested this dinner would be about me. My older brother, Adrian, was the family's gravitational center. Even as kids, he was the one my parents orbited. He played soccer moderately well. They built an entire schedule around tournaments. He got a marketing degree from a mediocre college. They threw a backyard gala as if he'd solved world hunger. I, on the other hand, graduated top of my class from an unforgiving accounting program, completed one of the hardest certifications in the field, and built a career uncovering multimillion-dollar fraud schemes. My parents responded with, "Oh good, so you won't ever worry about money," and promptly returned the spotlight to Adrian, who had just purchased a gas grill with his wife. But hope is persistent, doesn't die easily. Which is why, by Thursday afternoon, I found myself standing in front of my mirror, smoothing the sleeves of a tailored navy dress I'd bought for a conference presentation. I looked sharp, professional, like someone who belonged at a restaurant with foie gras on the menu. I grabbed my coat, locked my apartment, and drove toward the biggest trap I'd ever willingly entered. La Belle Étoile greeted me with a golden glow spilling through frosted glass. The valets looked like they'd been hired from modeling agencies. Everything smelled faintly of lavender, butter, and pretension. "Welcome," said the hostess, her smile soft and elegant. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes. Under Calderon." She typed gracefully, then nodded. "Ah, the Calderon party. They've already been seated." Course they had. Not even the courtesy of waiting. "Right this way," she said. I followed her into the cavernous dining room. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across pristine white tablecloths. Soft jazz drifted through the air. And there they were, a family, sitting at a massive round table dead center in the restaurant. It was the kind of table you put important guests at, not the daughter you tolerated. My father looked jovial and expansive, gesturing animatedly as he talked. My mother sat beaming, her pearls glinting under the chandelier. Adrian and his wife, Isla, were laughing at something my father said. In front of them, half-empty glasses of champagne, a spread of appetizers already demolished. They hadn't waited even 10 minutes. They had begun without me. The hostess slowed as we approached. My mother finally glanced up. Her face didn't light up with happiness. It flickered with mild surprise, like a server had brought the wrong side dish. "Oh, Lena," she said, voice perfectly neutral. "You're here." My father raised a hand in a half-hearted wave. Adrian gave me the polite smile he reserved for colleagues he didn't particularly like. I forced a smile in return. Sorry, I'm a little. My mother cut me off with a dismissive flick of her fingers. "No matter. We've already ordered the starters. You can sit there." She gestured. Not to an empty chair beside them. Not to a place set for me. But to a tiny two-seat table shoved near a narrow hallway that led to the restrooms. And blinked. Surely she didn't mean that table? Asked carefully. She nodded, cheerful as if discussing the weather. "Yes, dear. That one. We need this space for the core group." She said it kindly. She said it casually. She said it like it made perfect sense. The core group. Meaning, not me. Meaning. I had never been part of their inner circle. Not once. Not ever. My stomach dropped through the floor. My chest tightened. For years I told myself my parents loved me. They simply didn't know how to express it. That I was imagining things. That I was overly sensitive. But there it was. Stated plainly. I wasn't part of their real family. The hostess froze beside me, eyes widening in mortified disbelief. She looked at my mother, then at me, as though silently asking, "Is this really happening?" I swallowed, nodded, and said, "Okay." What else was there to say? My mother turned back to Adrian before my voice even faded. The hostess, cheeks pink on my behalf, led me toward the sad little table by the hallway. Each step felt heavy and hollow. When she left, I sank into my seat. From here I could hear everything. My family's laughter, clinking glasses, my mother's bright voice carrying across the restaurant. They didn't look toward me again. To them, I had already ceased to exist. And that was when the cold clarity began creeping in. The clarity that would change everything. The clarity that would lead to the decision I still mull over half a year later. But at that moment, sitting alone next to a hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and truffle oil, all I could do was stare at the tablecloth and try not to crumble. A waiter approached, young, soft-spoken, with kind eyes. "Good evening. Can I get you something to drink?" I looked at him, and something inside me finally snapped into place. "Yes," I said quietly. "A sparkling water with lime. And, could you bring the check right away? I'll only be staying a short while." His brows lifted slightly, but he nodded. "Of course." I watched him walk away. And that small rebellious act, the act of ordering the cheapest drink and requesting the bill up front, was the first step in the most liberating choice I have ever made. Because while they feasted at the expensive table in the center of the room, while they drank champagne and toasted to a celebration I wasn't privy to, I made a decision. A decision they never saw coming. A decision that would send the entire restaurant into chaos. The sparkling water arrived with a slice of lime perched delicately on the rim. The waiter set it down with a small bow, then placed the bill holder beside it. "One sparkling water," he said gently. "I'll leave this here for whenever you're ready." He had no idea how monumental his small kindness felt. I paid immediately. $5 for the drink, a $20 tip slipped beneath the receipt as a thank you for his humanity. And the instant my transaction was complete, something inside me shifted. The fear that had always governed my interactions with my family evaporated. In its place was a calm, calculated awareness. They expected me to pay. They assumed I would pay. They counted on me to fund a dinner I had not been invited to, seated at a table I had not been allowed to join. And for years I had obliged. Not today. Not again. Not ever. From my lonely table I could see everything. I watched Adrian and Isla lean in excitedly while my father waved a server over to order a second bottle of wine. My mother was fussing with Adrian's collar like he was still 16, glowing with pride over some accomplishment he hadn't even told me about. Then I saw it. A leather portfolio tucked beside his chair, the kind companies gifted when someone signed a major leadership contract. Adrian had been promoted. That was the real occasion. Course. And I hadn't been told. They didn't want me there to celebrate. They wanted me there to subsidize. The truth hit with brutal clarity. I wasn't family. I was their funding source. And suddenly, the soft ache that had always lived under my ribs hardened into resolve. If I had to leave them with something tonight, it wouldn't be money. It would be the truth. I stood and approached the front desk. The hostess, the same one who had witnessed the humiliation, straightened instinctively. "Is everything all right?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I said with a polite smile. "I just wanted to confirm something." Her eyes flickered with professional concern. "My bill is paid," I said, sliding my receipt onto the counter. "But my family's server might assume I'm covering the full party. I want to make sure their dinner is charged under the reservation holder's name." "Of course," she said quickly. "We'll ensure the check is presented to Mr. Calderon." "Perfect." I smiled, a real one this time. "Thank you for your help." Her expression softened just enough to tell me she understood exactly what kind of night I was having. I returned to my table but didn't sit. Instead, I stood there for a moment, looking at the sparkling water, the empty bill holder, the quiet corner I had been relegated to. For the first time in my life, it felt like a vantage point, not an exile. And from that vantage point, I watched the slow, inevitable unraveling. The entrees arrived at their table. Filet mignon for my father and Adrian, scallops for my mother and Isla, lobster for the kids, because apparently they felt like flexing. They laughed. They toasted. They devoured the meal without a single thought to who would absorb the consequence. As if it was owed to them. As if I existed solely to make their lives easier. And then, after nearly 40 minutes of spectacle, my father waved dramatically for the bill. His hand gesture was grand enough to be mistaken for royalty. The server arrived, placing the leather folder in front of him. He opened it, and time stopped. At first he simply blinked, as if the number at the bottom was a smudge that could be wiped away. Then he read it again, and again. His posture stiffened. His eyes widened. His face drained of color so abruptly he looked like he might topple out of his chair. My mother leaned in. "What is it?" He didn't answer. She plucked the receipt from his hands, and I watched her expression restructure itself in stages. Confusion, disbelief, shock, fury. $1,700, she hissed. Adrian's head jerked up. "What? That can't be just us." But of course it was. The restaurant had simply billed the party that had so enthusiastically indulged. And then, my mother's eyes snapped to me. Her expression sharpened. Her jaw clenched. She realized I hadn't intervened. I hadn't stepped in. I hadn't played my assigned role. I hadn't paid. Her face twisted with outrage, betrayal, and a kind of feral incredulity. She strode toward me like a storm given legs. "Lena," she hissed as she neared my table, "what exactly do you think you're doing?" I took a sip of sparkling water and looked at her with an almost meditative calm. "I'm sitting at the table you chose for me," I said. "Don't be clever," she snapped. "You know what I mean. Why didn't you handle the bill?" "Handle the bill?" I repeated softly. "Mom, I didn't eat with you." "That's irrelevant," she insisted. "You know how these dinners work." I knew exactly how they worked. Paid. Debas. And then blamed me if anything went wrong. "I paid for what I ordered," I said. $5. That's all that was mine. Her face contorted. "This is humiliating," she spat. "Do you understand what you've done to your father? To your brother? This is his celebration." "I see that," I said. "It must be a wonderful promotion." Her eyes flickered, shock that I knew mixed with annoyance that Adrian had told me nothing. "Don't change the subject," she snapped again. "You pay for family. That's what you do." "No," I said quietly. "That's what I've been conditioned to do." Her breath caught. I had never spoken to her this way. And she wasn't accustomed to it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice into a deadly whisper. "You are making a public spectacle." "No," I said. "You did that when you told me to sit at a separate table because you wanted space for the core family." Her pupils constricted. Her lips parted in denial. But before she could speak, Adrian approached. Slower, more hesitant. His brows were furrowed. His expression conflicted. "Lena," he said. "What's going on?" I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't fold. "I'm not paying for a dinner I wasn't invited to share," I said simply. "Mom made it clear I wasn't part of the group tonight. So I took her at her word." Adrian exhaled shakily. "Mom wouldn't say something like." "She did," I cut in gently. Word for word. The truth hung there, heavy, undeniable. My mother's face began to redden. "You're twisting things," she snapped. "You always dramatize. No more." She didn't get to rewrite this one. "You told me I wasn't part of the core family," I said. "And you told me to sit alone. So I did." I straightened. "And I let the core family handle their own bill." A few diners nearby gasped softly. My mother's fury ignited like gasoline on fire. "You selfish, ungrateful little." "No," I said sharply, louder than I intended. "Not anymore." Silence fell around us. Real heavy silence. Then my father approached. Slowly, stiffly, like someone preparing for a confrontation he knew he was not equipped to win. "Lena," he rumbled, "this isn't the time or place." "You chose the time," I said. "And Mom chose the place." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally he settled on a shaky attempt at authority. "You will pay for this dinner." "No," I said. He blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I will not pay. For the first time in my adult life, I am not paying for a humiliation you orchestrated." His jaw twitched. His nostrils flared. He looked as if I had committed treason. "You owe us," he growled. "After everything we've..." I laughed. A small, broken laugh that startled even me. "Owe you? For what?" "The decades of being overlooked. Forgotten. Treated as a resource. Belittled. Separated." My mother gasped. "That is outrageous." "No," I said again. "What's outrageous is that you all genuinely believed my worth was in my wallet. That my presence was optional but my payment was mandatory. That I should be grateful for scraps while you feasted." My voice didn't shake. For once. "You used me," I said quietly. "For years. And I let you. But I am done." My father's expression darkened. "You're abandoning your family." I shook my head. "You abandoned me a long time ago. Tonight just made it official." Then I reached for my purse, stood up, and stepped around them. My mother grabbed my wrist, but I pulled my arm free. "No," I said. "You don't get to touch me when it's convenient." Her eyes widened in stunned betrayal. "My bill is paid," I said to the server. "Everything else is theirs." He nodded solemnly. I walked toward the exit, my steps steady, my heart thundering with a strange mixture of grief and exhilaration. I could hear them behind me. My mother's frantic voice, my father's angry one, Adrian's confused one. But I didn't stop. Not when I reached the doors. Not when the night air hit my face. Not when I finally let myself breathe again. For the first time in my life I walked away. And I didn't look back. But walking away was only the beginning. Because the moment I stepped into my apartment, my phone lit up. First with calls. Then with demands. Then with something far more painful. A letter that would force me to confront everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. When I reached my apartment that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't even remove my coat. I simply stood in the dark entryway, staring at my silent, still phone sitting on the kitchen counter. I knew down to the marrow what was coming. 10 minutes passed. Then the phone exploded. Not literally, but violently enough to make me flinch. It buzzed so aggressively on the marble counter that it rattled like a trapped insect. My mother's name flashed across the screen. Then again. Followed by my father's. Followed by my brother's. The three people who could go hours, sometimes days, without acknowledging me were suddenly desperate for my attention. I stood motionless, watching the calls pour in. After the 6th call, the first text appeared. From Mom. "Lena, you answer this moment." "Oh. Do you hear me?" I did. I just didn't respond. More texts came rapid fire. Each message a new flavor of guilt, anger, or martyrdom. How could you humiliate your family like that? Your father is beside himself. He is ashamed. Your brother says he still cannot understand what you did. We raised you better than this. Lie. I placed the phone face down. Not on silent. Not turned off. Just face down because I wanted to hear the buzzing. I wanted to hear exactly how hard they were trying to pull me back into the role they'd assigned me. The unpaid intern of their emotional economy. My father's texts came next, structured like a formal reprimand from a man who had never once apologized for anything in his life. "Dad, You will transfer the amount urgently. $1,723.54. This is non-negotiable. Dad. We expect you to repair the embarrassment you caused. Dad. Do not make me request this again. Funny. Everything was always a demand. Never a question. Never a conversation. Never a request prefaced with, "Are you okay? Did something happen? Why were you seated separately?" My father didn't ask because he didn't need context. In his mind, the world was as follows. He was the authority. I was the utility. My compliance was the natural order. I let the messages accumulate, each new vibration a reminder of the power shift happening in real time. Finally, around midnight, the calls slowed, then stopped. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the crackling, buzzing tension of a storm waiting to strike again. The next morning, I opened my curtains and let the daylight pour in, bright and cold and honest. My phone was still face down on the table. I reached for it and flipped it over. 32 missed calls, 19 texts, 3 voicemails. Half were accusatory, half were manipulative. None were concerned. The last voicemail was from Adrian. He only called when he wanted me to fix something or cover for him. Press play. His voice filled the room, muffled, shaky, unsure. "Lena, I don't know what happened last night. Mom said something about you misunderstanding her. Dad's furious. Isla's upset. Everyone's upset. Can you please just call me? I want to understand. Really. Just call me. Please." It was the closest thing to empathy I would get from my family. But I wasn't ready to be dragged back into a role I'd outgrown. I deleted the voicemail. Then I put my phone on airplane mode. A small, symbolic rebellion. The next 2 days unfolded in a haze of conflicting emotions. Relief, grief, clarity. They came in waves, unpredictable and sharp. One minute I felt triumphant. The next, I felt like a child who had just slammed a door she could never reopen. On Monday morning I left for work, bracing myself for a day of spreadsheets, fraud analyses, and a few coworkers asking if I was doing okay. I threw myself into my tasks, grateful for the cold precision of numbers, the one thing that had never betrayed me. At lunch, I ate alone in my car, savoring the silence. It was the calmest I had felt in years. But calm I knew never lasts. When I got home Monday evening, a large cream-colored envelope sat in my mailbox. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's perfect, looping script, aggressively elegant. Letter. I closed the mailbox slowly, holding the envelope like a piece of radioactive material. Inside my apartment, I set my keys on the counter, and the letter beside them. Then I walked away. For 3 hours. I cooked dinner, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and did everything possible to avoid opening it. But eventually, avoidance becomes its own kind of torture. I sat at the dining table, slid my thumb under the flap, and unfolded 3 pages of thick stationery. My breath caught after the first sentence, because it began exactly the way I feared. Not with empathy, not with curiosity, not with a question, but with accusation. Page 1. The accounting. Lena, your behavior last Thursday was beyond unacceptable. You humiliated this family in public, and your father and I are still reeling from the shame. I grimaced. Shame. They weren't ashamed of what they'd done. They were ashamed of being confronted. The letter continued. We have always provided for you. We have made countless sacrifices, financial and emotional, to support you. And yet you chose to repay us with cruelty. Then came the list. A literal list. She documented everything they had ever paid for. Half your piano lessons from age 7 to 9. Chiropractor visits after your college car accident. $500 toward your first car. School clothes when you were 13. Christmas gifts over the years. College textbooks. The roof over your head during your childhood. And of course, countless dinners we have generously hosted. Generously hosted. I stared at the words. Every expense they had ever covered, every minor, ordinary parental responsibility, was now a weapon. A receipt they believed they could cash in. The tone sharpened as the letter went on. After all we have done for you, the very least you could do was pay for one dinner. But instead, you abandoned your family and left your father to handle a bill that was rightfully yours. Rightfully mine. I felt something old and aching crack inside my chest. Page 2 was worse. Somehow, she found a way to turn my entire life into evidence of ingratitude. You have always been distant, cold. You care more about your career than your family. You hide in numbers and work because you are afraid of connection. We have tried so hard to love you. You refused to let us. Laugh escaped me. Not because it was funny, but because the lie was so outrageous it almost felt surreal. They had never tried to love me. They had tried to shape me, to use me, to mold me into something useful. Love had never been part of the equation. The letter continued. You embarrassed Adrian on what should have been the proudest night of his life. You hurt him deeply. You owe him an apology. And you owe us all restitution. Restitution. As if I were a criminal. As if my refusal to be exploited was a crime against the family. Then came the closing line on page 2. If you care about repairing this family, you will pay what you owe and come to your senses. This is your chance to redeem yourself. Redeem myself. For what? For finally telling the truth. The final page contained one sentence centered at the top in small, precise handwriting. Amount owed. $1,723.54. Below it, she had drawn a blank line where I was supposed to write a check. Like I was settling an invoice. As if our entire relationship had always been a transaction. Maybe it had been. My hands trembled as I lowered the letter. For the first time since the restaurant, tears stung my eyes. Not from guilt. Not from fear. From grief. Raw, unfiltered grief. Because whatever fantasy I had been clinging to, the fantasy that deep down, beneath the criticism and neglect my parents loved me, was gone. I'd always known something was off. I just never expected them to put it in writing. I reread the first line again. Your behavior was beyond unacceptable. But the most telling sentence of all appeared near the bottom. We have tried. They hadn't tried. They had performed. Performed motherhood. Performed fatherhood. Performed family. Now the performance was cracked wide open. I folded the letter, mechanically, and walked to my office. I took out my own stationery and with hands steady as stone, wrote my reply. Mom and Dad. Enclosed is a check for $5. The cost of my sparkling water. This settles my portion of Thursday's dinner. Lena. No anger. No explanation. No justification. Just truth. I set down the pen, picked up the letter, and fed both into my shredder. Watching the confetti fall into the bin felt like the softest, quietest liberation. Afterward, I texted Adrian exactly 9 words. I need space. Please don't contact me for a while. Then I blocked all 3 of them. Phone, email, social media. Every door they had ever used to guilt their way into my life. Closed. For the first time in 30 years. I was not reachable. And the silence that followed. It didn't feel empty. Felt like oxygen. Felt like beginning. But silence never lasts forever. Because 3 weeks later, just when I thought I had cut every tie, Adrian knocked on my door. And he wasn't alone. When ghosts show up at the door. For 3 blissful weeks, my apartment became a sanctuary. No vibrating phone. No demands for money. No guilt-soaked lectures. No carefully worded manipulation disguised as love. Just me. Just quiet. Just the strange, unexpected peace of finally stepping outside the gravitational pull of a family that had consumed me for 3 decades. Work felt lighter. Sleep came easier. My chest loosened in a way I didn't realize was possible. The world seemed sharper, clearer, like I'd been living behind fogged glass and someone finally wiped it clean. But clarity is a double-edged blade. It lets you see beauty you'd overlooked, and truth you'd been taught to ignore. The truth was this. For the first time in my life, no one owned a piece of me. And that terrified them. I knew it. I expected the storm. I just didn't expect it to arrive on a quiet Saturday morning. With a knock. Soft knock. Not the pounding demanded by authority. Hesitant one. The kind that meant the person on the other side wasn't sure I'd open the door. I froze halfway between the living room and the kitchen. No one knocked on my door unannounced. Not friends. Not neighbors. Not delivery drivers. No one. My heartbeat picked up. I set down my coffee. Waited. A second knock came, slightly firmer this time. Lena. My brother's voice split through the quiet like a blade. For a moment my brain refused to process it. Adrian. Here. I didn't move. I didn't answer. Maybe he'd think I wasn't home. I know you're there, he said softer. Your car's outside. Please, just open the door. Closed my eyes. I should have parked in the garage. My mind raced, not with fear but with a kind of emotional calculus. Did I want to open the door? Did I owe him that? Then he said something that froze the decision in my chest. I'm not alone. I stiffened. A dozen scenarios flashed through my mind. My mother. My father. Both of them. I swallowed hard. But then the answer revealed itself when a voice, quiet, almost whisper-soft, spoke behind him. Lena. It's Isla. My sister-in-law. Not my parents. Not the two people I least wanted to face. Still not great. Isla was sweet, passive, conflict-avoidant to a fault. She blended into the Calderon dynamic because she never challenged it. Never had to. But she had never once crossed a boundary with me. And Adrian had sounded genuinely lost. I exhaled shakily and walked toward the door. My hand hovered above the doorknob. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't reconciliation. This was information gathering. I turned the lock, opened the door, and stared. Adrian looked nothing like the polished golden boy who sat at the center table that night. He looked tired. His hair was unstyled. His shirt wrinkled, dark circles smudged under his eyes. He looked, God help me, human. Isla stood slightly behind him, her small hands clasped together, face pale with worry. They both looked relieved. Relieved because I had opened the door. Hey, Adrian said softly. Hi, I replied, my voice cautious. He took a breath. Can we come in? I didn't answer immediately. He noticed. We're not here to fight, he added quickly. We're not here to convince you to unblock anyone. We're not here to pressure you into anything. His eyes dropped to the floor. I just need to talk to you. Something about the way he said it, quiet, stripped of pride, cut through my defenses just enough. I opened the door wider. 5 minutes, I said. That's all. He nodded. They stepped inside. The moment they entered the living room, Adrian stopped and looked around. He hadn't been in my apartment for years. It's nice, he said quietly. Shrugged. It's home. He nodded again. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, he rubbed the back of his neck and sat on the edge of the chair like he wasn't sure he was allowed to get comfortable. I know you're upset, he began. I raised an eyebrow. Upset. What a tiny, insufficient word. But I let him speak. I've been thinking about that night, he continued. A lot. I don't know if Mom told me everything. I almost laughed. If Mom told you everything, you'd have arrived with an apology pizza and a bouquet of flowers begging forgiveness for 30 years. But I didn't interrupt. What did she tell you? Yes. He hesitated. She said you misunderstood her. That she never meant anything insulting. That you overreacted. There it was. The Calderon doctrine. Anything painful was a misunderstanding. Anything cruel was accidental. Anything questioned was overreacted to. I took a deep breath. Adrian, I said gently. Did Mom tell you she pointed to a separate table and said you needed the space for the core family? I watched the color drain from his face. She said something about seating, he stammered. Did she tell you she said I wasn't part of the core group? He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stared at me, stunned realization forming in his expression. No, he whispered. She didn't tell me that part. Of course she didn't, I said calmly. Because she knew if she did, you'd question the whole story. His jaw clenched. A betrayal flickered across his eyes, aimed not at me but at her. Isla spoke for the first time, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry, Lena. We had no idea. Her sincerity was painful, unexpected, and real. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Lena, if she actually said that, I'm God, I don't even know what to say. He ran both hands through his hair, overwhelmed. I thought you were being dramatic, he admitted. I thought you were just having a moment. Moment. That stung. But now, he whispered, I think you might have been dealing with something for a long time that I didn't see. No kidding. I exhaled slowly, gathering my thoughts. Adrian, I said, voice steady. I love you. You're my brother. But you've been benefiting from the way they treat me your entire life. You didn't see the problem because you were the beneficiary of the system. He winced. I know, he whispered. I know. And you never looked too closely because it worked for you. Silence. Heavy, honest silence. I'm not blaming you, I said softly. But you have to understand I've been drowning in this dynamic for years. And that night, I finally hit the bottom. He nodded slowly, eyes wet. I never realized, he murmured. I never, God, Lena, I should have known. I should have seen it. You weren't meant to, I said. You were the one they built the family around. I was the extra piece they didn't know what to do with. He looked at me with such raw guilt that it nearly undermined the wall I'd spent weeks rebuilding. Is that really how you felt? He whispered. Not felt, I corrected. How I was treated. Adrian covered his face with both hands. Isla reached out, resting a tentative hand on his back. Lena, she said softly, we're not here to defend them. We're here because Adrian doesn't know what to do anymore. My brother lowered his hands, eyes red. I don't know how to fix this, he confessed. I don't know if it can be fixed. But I want you back in my life. Not as the person who keeps the peace. Or the one who pays for everything. Just my sister. Something inside me twisted. Oh, the dangerous kind. I inhaled slowly. Adrian, I don't know what a relationship between us looks like if you stay inside their dynamic. Because I can't go back to being who I was. I can't be the forgotten one. The afterthought. The problem. You won't be, he said quickly. I swear. You say that, I whispered. But can you hold that boundary when Mom demands otherwise? When Dad pressures you? When the family system tries to snap you back into place? He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered. I don't know. And that was the first honest thing he'd said all morning. The conversation stretched into an hour, raw, painful, and filled with truths we had both avoided for years. In the end, Adrian stood and looked at me with hollow eyes. I want to do better, he said. But I'm not sure where to start. I offered a gentler smile than I expected. You start, I said, by understanding you can't fix Mom and Dad. You can only fix you. And I can only fix me. He nodded. We walked to the door. He hesitated before stepping out. Can I text you? He asked. Just to check in sometimes. Yes, I said quietly. You can. His shoulders loosened with relief. Isla hugged me, surprising me completely, and whispered, You deserved better. You always did. Then they left. The door clicked shut. And I stood in the quiet hallway for a long moment. Adrian meant well. He always had. But good intentions can be swallowed whole by a dysfunctional system. And I didn't know whether he could escape it. Whether he'd even try. But something told me the real storm was still coming. Because isolating me was one thing. Blocking me was another. But letting me walk away entirely. My parents would never allow that without a final attempt at control. And I was right. Because 2 days later, something happened that none of us were prepared for. On Tuesday morning, I received a message from an unexpected source. Not my mother. Not my father. Not my brother. But from someone who had no business contacting me at all. My parents' attorney. And what he sent shattered everything. The envelope that shouldn't have existed. When I saw the email notification on my work laptop Tuesday morning, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. From Barton and Lowe Legal Associates. Subject. Regarding Calderon family matter. Immediate attention requested. My first reaction. Well, absolutely not. What the hell is this? My parents had many flaws. Emotional negligence, self-righteousness, selective blindness. But escalating things to a legal level? That was new. That was dangerous. That was deliberate. I hesitated for several minutes before clicking the message open. Inside was a short, sterile paragraph. Ms. Lena Calderon. We have been retained by Mr. and Mrs. Calderon to address an unresolved financial matter related to a recent family dinner. They have requested that we formally contact you regarding the outstanding sum of $1,718.54, which they assert is your responsibility. We request that you acknowledge receipt of this communication within 7 business days. Respectfully, Alan Prescott, Attorney at Law, Barton and Lowe. The words blurred. Not because I couldn't read them. 'Cause I could. 'Cause I understood exactly what this meant. My parents hired an attorney to collect a fabricated debt. For a dinner I didn't attend. At a table I wasn't allowed to sit at. After telling me I wasn't part of their real family. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't ashamed. They weren't reflecting. They were retaliating. Slow, shaking breath escaped me. This wasn't about money. This was about control. They were using the one tool they'd always weaponized against me. Responsibility, duty, obligation, but now wrapped in legal intimidation. Message. A warning. Punishment. But the irony. They had picked the wrong daughter for this particular game. I was a forensic accountant. I dealt with legal documentation, financial fraud, and corporate disputes on a weekly basis. If they wanted to play with lawyers, I knew exactly how to hold my ground. That evening after work I drove straight home. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from fear but from adrenaline. My parents wanted escalation. I would give them clarity, not conflict. Clarity. I poured myself tea, opened my laptop, and started writing my response, not to them but to the attorney. I kept my tone professional, concise, and freezing cold. Subject. Re. Calderon Family Matter. To Prescott@bartonlowelllegal.com. Mr. Prescott, I acknowledge receipt of your email. The alleged debt is invalid, as I did not participate in the dinner in question. I was seated separately, ordered only a sparkling water for which I paid on site, and was explicitly excluded from the party's table. Any claim that I owe money for a dinner I neither attended nor consumed is factually incorrect. Furthermore, any attempt to pursue a fraudulent debt constitutes legal harassment. I expect written confirmation within 7 days that this claim has been withdrawn. Respectfully, Lena Calderon. I read the email twice. There were no insults, no emotion, no cracks for guilt to seep through. Just facts, a language my family had never understood. I hit send. And immediately afterward my phone, silent for weeks, buzzed from across the kitchen counter. Froze. Had unblocked no one. No one should have been able to reach me. I walked toward the counter slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. The screen flashed with a number I didn't recognize. No name. Unknown caller. My heart tightened. Attorneys often called from blocked or masked numbers. Or people calling from someone else's phone. I answered cautiously. Hello. A shaky breath crackled through the line. Lena. My mother's voice. I went rigid. How did you get this number? She ignored the question entirely. I cannot believe, she said, voice trembling with manufactured outrage, that you would threaten legal action against your own parents. I almost laughed. Mom, I said flatly, you hired a lawyer. She scoffed. We contacted an attorney for advice. You escalated it. I responded. I corrected. I didn't escalate. You could have come to us directly, she snapped. You stopped having direct conversations when you mailed me a 3-page character assassination, I replied calmly. Silence. Thick, offended silence. You are destroying this family, she whispered. I didn't destroy anything, I said. I stepped away from something that was already broken. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being honest. Another pause. Then her voice sharpened dangerously. You think you can embarrass us publicly? You think you can speak to an attorney on our behalf without consequences? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Mom, this conversation is no longer appropriate, I said. If you want to continue discussing a fabricated debt, speak through your attorney. Lena hung up, not slamming the phone, not yelling, just ending the conversation, quietly, decisively, and then I blocked the unknown number. Again. This time I left no window open. The following morning, I received an email response from the attorney, not from my mother or father. I opened it cautiously. Subject. Re. Calderon Family Matter. Ms. Calderon, thank you for your timely response. I have reviewed the situation with my clients. Please be advised that the claim has been formally withdrawn. No further contact will be made regarding this matter. Respectfully, Alan Prescott. I sat back in my chair, hands trembling, not with fear, with something that felt dangerously close to power. For the first time in my life I stood up to them and won. No begging, no defending, no bargaining, just truth. A truth they couldn't rewrite or manipulate. A truth they couldn't weaponize. A truth that forced them legally to back down. But the victory was short-lived, because less than 10 minutes later my email pinged again. New message. Not from the attorney, not from my father, not from my mother, but from Adrian. Subject: please don't ignore this. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Lena: Mom and Dad told me everything. I didn't know they went to a lawyer. I didn't know they sent you a bill. They're panicking. I think things are getting out of control. Please, can we talk? Adrian. I stared at the message. My brother was trying. He was. But trying didn't erase decades of imbalance. Trying didn't erase systems he still lived inside. Trying didn't erase the fact that my parents were spiraling because, for once, I wasn't being their obedient daughter. Trying didn't mean I had to come back to the emotional war zone. Closed the email, heart pounding. My brother wanted me to mediate, soothe, fix, the role I'd always played. But I wasn't stepping back into it. Not this time. Not ever. I stood from my desk and walked to the window. Outside, sunlight spilled across the street. People walked dogs, carried groceries, held hands, lived normal lives. Lives not dictated by guilt. Not dictated by people who couldn't love without conditions. And that's when my phone buzzed again. Flinched. But this time the preview on the screen didn't make my stomach drop. It made my heart crack wide open. From Isla. We need to talk. Something happened. I frowned. Something happened. I tapped the notification, opened the message, and felt the blood drain from my face. Because whatever I thought the worst outcome was, I was wrong. So very painfully wrong. The final ledger. Isla's message sat on my phone like a live wire. We need to talk. Something happened. My heartbeat quickened. Not the anxious pounding I used to feel when my parents called, but a slower, heavier thud. The kind your body makes when preparing for impact. I typed back. What happened? Her reply came less than a minute later. Adrian told them he's taking a step back too. They didn't take it well. Froze. He stared. Read the message again. And again. My brother, my golden, adored, untouchable brother, stepped back? From them. From Mom and Dad. Felt impossible. Like gravity switching directions. I typed quickly. What do you mean? What did he say? What did they do? The phone buzzed immediately. Sla was calling. Answered. She didn't bother with greetings. They're losing it, she said breathlessly. They're furious at you, but now they're furious at him too. I sank onto the couch, stunned. Is he okay? I asked quietly. There was a pause. Then a soft exhale. No, she admitted. Not really. A new, unwelcome ache thrummed in my chest. I hated my parents for what they'd done to me. But I did not want this for Adrian. What happened? I whispered. She hesitated, gathering her thoughts. He came home upset after talking to you, she began. He didn't tell me everything right away, but I could tell the conversation shook him. He realized things about your family dynamic he hadn't seen before. My throat tightened. Isla continued. He confronted your parents last night. I stood so fast the couch cushion sighed. He what? He told them they were wrong. That they had treated you unfairly. That they owed you an apology. That he couldn't keep pretending things were fine. That was unprecedented. Revolutionary. Dangerous. My parents did not tolerate dissent. Not from me. Not from anyone. And certainly not from the son they'd spent 35 years shaping into their mirror image. How did they react? Yes. Isla let out a small, bitter laugh. How do you think? I sat down slowly, bracing myself. They told him, she said, voice tight, that you manipulated him. A hollow pain bloomed in my chest. They always reacted that way. If I expressed hurt, manipulation. If I set boundaries, manipulation. If I refused to be used, manipulation. Their inability to conceive of me as a person, not an accessory, was total. They said, Isla continued, that you'd always been jealous of him, that you were trying to split the family, that you were dangerous. The word sliced through me. Dangerous, me, for walking away, for protecting myself, for refusing to fund them. Isla's voice softened. I'm so sorry, Lena. You didn't deserve that. I swallowed. What did Adrian say? He defended you, she answered. He told them you'd been hurt for years, that you had every right to step away, that you weren't going to be their scapegoat anymore. My eyes burned. Not with tears, not yet, but with something deeper. Recognition. A flicker of the sibling closeness we might have had, in a better world. And then, Isla continued. He told them he needed space too. I went still. Completely still. They didn't handle that well, she added. Course they didn't. Losing me was inconvenient. Losing Adrian. Unthinkable. What did they do? I whispered. Isla hesitated. Then carefully. They told him if he chose you, he was choosing wrong. My breath caught. And, they said if he wanted to be part of the core family, he needed to distance himself from you. The words struck like a physical blow. Core family. The phrase that started everything. The phrase that sliced the world in two. The phrase that showed me exactly where I stood. Even now, even after everything, they still drew the line. Adrian on one side. Me on the other. But now Adrian stepped over the line. Not completely. Not confidently. But willingly. And for my parents that was betrayal. Where is he now? Yes. With me, Isla said. He left their house and hasn't gone back. I exhaled shakily. Is he angry with me? No, she said firmly. If anything, he's angry at himself. For not seeing it sooner. A lump rose in my throat. Lena, Isla continued softly. He said you were right. About everything. Covered my eyes. This wasn't victory. It wasn't vindication. It was tragedy. A necessary tragedy. But tragedy all the same. I didn't want him dragged into this, I whispered. You didn't drag him anywhere, she replied. He walked. On his own. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. Do you want to talk to him? She asked. The question hung in the air. Fragile, complicated, heavy. I inhaled deeply. Only if he wants to, I said. I don't want to pressure him. He does, Isla said gently. He's right here. Can I put him on? My voice was barely audible. Yes, Russell. Was. Lena. His voice. Trained. Human. Hey, I whispered. A shaky exhale crackled through the phone. I'm sorry, he said immediately. For everything. For not seeing it. For not helping. For not protecting you. I should've. Stop, I murmured. Please. You don't owe me apologies for things you were raised not to see. But I should have seen it, he insisted. It was right in front of me. Adrian, I said gently. You were raised inside a system that required your blindness. I don't blame you for surviving it. I only blame them for building it. Silence. A relieved, painful silence. I don't know what happens now, he admitted. I don't know how to be a brother without feeling like I'm betraying them. Closed my eyes. I don't know either, I said truthfully. But we can figure it out. Slowly. With boundaries. With space. He exhaled, shaky but steadying. I want to try, he whispered. Me too. Another silence, gentler this time. Then he said something that cracked me open completely. You're not alone anymore, Lena. Not in this. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not from sadness, but from the weight lifting off my chest. A weight I had carried for 30 years. We talked for a long time. Longer than we had in a decade. He didn't ask me to forgive our parents. He didn't ask me to go back. He didn't try to minimize what happened. He simply listened. And for the first time in my life I felt like I had a sibling. Not a competitor. Not a shadow. Not an afterthought. Brother. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my living room and let the emotions wash over me. Grief, relief, bewilderment, hope. The messy, complicated healing that comes after a lifetime of hurt. Breathed in. Breathed out. For the first time it didn't feel like I was collapsing. Felt like I was rebuilding. 2 days later, Isla sent a brief update. We're keeping our distance. Things are calmer now. We're here if you need us. And I realized something. I wasn't escaping a family. I was creating a new one. Smaller. Kinder. Honest. Mutual. Built not on obligation but on choice. A family where my presence wasn't a burden. Where my worth wasn't measured in dollars. Where my identity wasn't a footnote in someone else's story. A family where I had a seat at the table. Not the small table by the hallway. A real table. One I helped build. Months passed. Sometimes they were easy. Sometimes they were brutal. Healing isn't linear. And grief doesn't vanish just because it was necessary. But the weight in my chest got lighter. My apartment got quieter but in a good way. My life got smaller but in a peaceful way. And my world grew clearer, but in a beautiful way. I didn't reconcile with my parents. Some stories don't end with redemption. Some end with truth. And mine finally had it. But one question lingered. Not haunting me, but humming quietly in the background. Was I wrong for walking away? Some nights I still ask myself. Some mornings I still wonder. But every time I pour my own coffee, sit at my own table, in my own home, surrounded not by the family I was born into, but by the connections I built, I know the answer. I wasn't wrong. I was finally right.